Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask the Zen Doctor. This is episode 20 of this series, and sadly to say, it will be the last show for a while. But as I explained before the show to our guests, it doesn't mean goodbye. Please feel free to follow me on the Zen Doctor podcast channel, and of course, I'll continue posting videos on YouTube. Now, the subject today has been proposed to me by Ruth. Ruth is somebody who follows me on Twitter, and indeed she was the one who was interested in bioresonance therapy that we did about 3 weeks ago. And she has asked me this week, what is the definition of the word psychoic? Now, that's the title of my last book, The Psychoic Revolution. And the truth is that there is no official definition, because the last time I checked in the Oxford English Dictionary, the word psychoic is not there. So at the moment, it's unique, but I'm sure that it won't be forever. And the reason why I chose the word psychoic for the title of my last book was because it's like the word is like a midpoint between the psychic state of mind and the psychotic state of mind. And I define it as the sweet spot in the middle that takes the best of both of those different states of mind and elevates our performance and our thinking to a much higher level. And indeed, if there is an entry point for tapping into universal intelligence, then this just might be it. So I'll start by talking about the word psychic. I'll talk a little bit about our evolution. We have been around this planet for roughly 1 million years. People argue about the number of years because we were always evolving and we're all following different branches on the evolutionary tree. And sometime about 30 or 40,000 years ago, it was the Ice Age. And normally you would expect things to slow down in an ice age, particularly for warm-blooded people who are struggling to stay warm. But for some reason, it seems to be a period of rapid evolutionary growth for us, Homo sapiens. The Neanderthals, our closest cousins, they were around at that time, but sadly they didn't last much longer. And for one reason or another, we decided that we were going to get rid of them all. And I'll touch on that in a couple of minutes. But this was the time when we didn't speak to each other. We know from records that we were capable of grunting, but we didn't have the anatomical voice box and the muscles and things, or perhaps even the brain wiring that would allow us to talk. But it was in this magic era of the Ice Age, 30, 40,000 years ago, that people think that we did learn to construct simple words. And the other interesting thing about that period is that is when we started, or when archaeologists have discovered cave paintings. So rather than just surviving, doing enough to be hunter-gatherers, moving around the planet in small tribes, we were getting ourselves organized, and we were having more abstract thoughts, almost spiritual thoughts, perhaps people are saying, and that's what these daubed sort of paintings in caves are. So we didn't talk, so how did we manage to survive? And how did we manage to be relatively organized, albeit in small family groups? Well, that is because, yes, we did have nonverbal communication. We had body language, we had the grunting, we had the pinching and the biting and the ear pulling. So I guess there were all kinds of ways that we could roughly make our feelings known. But the other thing that we had is that we had psychic powers. We were somehow much more intuitive than perhaps we are today. So these people from that era, they often knew what they had to do without knowing how they knew, and not even caring how they knew. They just knew stuff. They knew, just like animals do now, the migrating herds that know when it's time to move to a different part of the desert, or the migrating birds who know with almost Swiss watch precision when is the time to leave and go to warmer pastures as the winter closes in, as it is doing in the Northern Hemisphere right now. This is the big migration season. And if you think our daily commute to the office is pretty bad, some of these birds literally fly from one end of the planet and back again to the same tree every single year. That's a lot of air miles. And they have to eat and drink on the way. And of course, they can't afford to get lost. So again, no bird is born with a map in its head or a GPS. It's got something much better. It's got the miracle of creation inside it that knows this kind of stuff. Even bees know where they are. So at the risk of getting off the point a little bit, I'll get back. You know, this was when we were psychic, or at least that's my supposition. And then something happened pretty quickly, and as I mentioned, we learned to talk. Now, of course, it's a bit like us navigating in our cars. Until relatively recently, we didn't have sat-nav. We didn't have these smart phones that would shout orders at us in whatever language or dialect we wanted. We would have an atlas and we would work out our route like that. And sometimes we'd get lost. And sometimes we didn't even use an atlas. We knew roughly where we were going, and we'd get in the car and we'd drive. And if we did get lost, we'd stop at a shop and ask somebody where we were. And we'd pretty much always turn up. So we had some sort of innate navigation skills there. But now we've got GPS. As soon as the GPS is down, the sat-nav is down, we panic. Because even if we're 5 miles from home, quite often we don't know where we are. So use it or lose it. And we have lost our innate navigation skills largely because of sat-nav. And so it is with our ancestors. They learned how to talk and communicate in verbal ways, and they lost some of this psychic connection to nature or to other human beings or to animals, these psychic skills, which remain in most of us, well, all of us, largely hidden now. But that's the key word, hidden. Doesn't mean to say that they're not there, doesn't mean to say that we all can't get a little closer to our psychic ancestry. So we learn how to talk. You might think, well, that's brilliant. Just like when Facebook was launched, we learned to communicate with like-minded people. Well, learning to talk for the first time was great, or shall we say, it was great for some people. Because the people who were the best talkers, the best communicators, were also the ones who became the best politicians, and they carved out the best positions in the tribe for themselves. And learning to talk was not so brilliant because, as we all know, we had invented or created or evolved language skills, and words are always ambiguous. The same word can mean a different thing to every single different person. The intonation when you use a word can convey a different meaning. The written word can be particularly ambiguous because we have no body language or other nonverbal communication to balance it. The other problem is, and I'm going back now to the show 2 weeks ago, where Greg and Sylvia shared their experiences of Kabbalah with us, and very interesting it was too. And Sylvia made the comment right straight up. She said, if you want to understand Kabbalah, you have to recognize that you are seeing 1% of the world. And the 1% of the world that you're seeing is a very deluded view of the world, because it doesn't take into account the other 99%, which is out there that you can't tap into, just like you can't tap into those hidden psychic skills. So instead of being psychic, we have become, to a greater or lesser degree, psychotic, because we are basically living in a deluded view of the world. And yet our ego, our conscious mind, because that's the only world that it knows, that's the reality. So what we think is reality probably couldn't be further from the truth. The reality that we are measuring or calibrating is literally our five senses. That's all we have: what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we smell, what we taste. But, you know, I've mentioned before about the electromagnetic spectrum, and this isn't a physics lesson, but that's just a fraction of the bandwidth that's out there in nature. So, is being psychotic bad? Well, it's like all things. It has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that we're divorced from reality, and because it's a spectrum, psychosis is a spectrum, at the far end of it, people are living in a totally delusional world which has almost zero connection with reality. And those people are sick people. They don't choose to be like that. That's just the way their brains are for some reason or another, which we don't understand. Most of us are somewhere a bit less extreme on that spectrum. And the good thing about having a little bit of psychotic tendency is that it means we're very creative. It means that we can make videos in our head. And instead of the videos that we're playing at the moment, which we think is reality, we can actually stretch those boundaries and make videos in our head that even we know are a little bit unreal. And I know nobody's going to the cinema at the moment. Can't even see the latest James Bond movie now, being pushed back again. But film directors, they know how to push these boundaries. They know how to have an audience literally spellbound, because we go there and for an hour and a half or 2 hours, we are living in a different world and we're really loving the different experience, because we know that after 2 hours, somehow or other, James Bond will still survive, and somehow or other, we will get back to our cozy room and we will be safe as well. So that is, I guess you could say, fear, appreciation of fear by Proxhausen, like Munchausen appreciation of fear. We're doing it, you know, a long way away, but we're still getting the feelings. So that's why I thought if we could find this sweet spot on this spectrum between those old psychic skills and our psychotic tendencies, this just might be a good state of mind where we can connect to other things. Now, I call it having the Zen mind state. Doesn't mean you've got an empty mind. It means you've got a balanced mind, and it means you have a calm mind, because only in the quiet can the truth speak. So only in a quiet mind can some of these deeper, intuitive, psychic type feelings start to surface. And we may not be able to put words to them, but we know what they are. And that's why I've talked about infinite intelligence, because that is the goal. If you can get into this state of mind, or if we can, then it doesn't mean we're going to tap into infinite intelligence, but we're going to tap into something that is outside ourselves, that helps us to do things that we ordinarily would not be able to do. And for people who are sports people, or people in business, people who are creatives, frankly, any of us, we can all do that. Greg and Sylvia 2 weeks ago said the very same thing about Kabbalah. Now, as I honestly said, I knew nothing about Kabbalah, but when they used the word light, it's very similar to me and other people use the word infinite intelligence, or what other people refer to as their higher self, or the connection to God or gods. I guess it's all the same kind of thing. So that's, so Ruth, I hope you're watching this live or on the video. So thank you for that question. And that's a bit more about this word psychotic. It isn't the best title for a book to explain it on a TV program or a radio program, because the first thing people ask is, how do you spell it? And often I can't remember how it's spelled. I'm not a very good speller. And then they ask you, what does it mean? Which is okay, because I hope I probably answered that question now. The sweet spot between the psychic and the psychotic states of mind. So there is one other thing that I want to talk about this evening before at this stage, but I'll take a little breather now, and I would welcome any of your views on what I've just said. Definitely what I've said is pretty controversial, or would be to many people, but to me, that's how I describe these things, and other people, think in philosophies like three principles, and certainly in Zen Buddhism, and now we've learned the little that I know now of Kabbalah. It seems to be a thread through there. There are people who think the same stuff, although they put different words to it, ambiguous words, of course. So, do we have any questions or comments from anybody, Greg?
Going back to what you said about the senses and how we use them and the use of speech, I wonder, do we actually listen to ourselves, what the mind says, what the mind does? And you've spoken on the senses. We judge most things by the senses. But how do we know those senses are actually right? If I go back to somebody like René Descartes, used to use the example of the small house on the side of a hill, and we of course look at it and say, well, it's not a small house on the side of a hill, it's a normal sized house there. But we accept that our senses are actually right. But how do we know they are right? What happens if they're wrong?
Well, that's a good question. And I like the analogy that you quote from Descartes, the little house on the hill. It's like we think a spider. I'm surrounded by spiders at the moment. That's why I thought about it. We think spiders are small little insects, and most of them are pretty harmless. But if we were a tiny, tiny bug, a spider would be huge and frightening. And when you look at a spider underneath an electron micrograph, it is truly terrifying. It's all teeth and fangs and long legs and hooks and all, you name it. You wouldn't want to be snatched by that when you stumble into the web. So I guess that's an example that, even the vision that we take for granted is really only a fraction of what's out there. So these feelings, how can you trust them? Well, none of us are going to get it 100% right. I think I wrote a blog, or we had a previous show where we talked about the difference between thinking stuff and knowing stuff. And the problem is that we do a lot of thinking in the part of the brain that we will loosely call the ego, the part of the brain that's definitely in the conscious mind. So ego has its own voice and will be speaking to us, and it knows what else is going on in the conscious mind. And so really it knows what we're thinking. And ego will steer the conversation. It will steer the conversation to not doing anything new, because that's too risky. Their ego is there as the great protector. Ego is also the great expert. It's the teacher who never knows when to shut up, because that ego will constantly remind us of our shortcomings, and will rarely give credit for our strengths. And every single person has at least one strength. And if ego does recognize a strength, then that will be his or her strength, and they will remind you of that. Without you, you would be nothing. So you better do what I say. So that's ego. I think we all know about it. We've got that internal dialogue inside our head. We all have that. And I know that Ray's the golfer of the group, and when I started mind coaching, I worked exclusively with golfers, including top golfers and tour players. And it doesn't really matter whether they were a tour player who's gone on to win a major or whether they were a club player. It's always, their internal dialogue is always the same. And it'll be a beating up type thing. And with club golfers, Ray, you'll know this very well, it's quite incredible the things that people will call themselves when they've done some serious crime, like they've miscued a golf ball. Well, does anybody in their group they're playing with care? No, most of them won't see it. And if they did see it, they won't remember it anyway. But to the person who has miscued this shot, at that moment, it's the most important thing they have in their life. So ego is no amigo. And if you recognize the grip that ego has on you, that's going a long way to putting ego in a box. You'll never get rid of it, and you probably shouldn't. But what is definitely important is to allow your mind to be balanced and calm and quiet. Ego will be chattering 24/7 if it's allowed to. There have got to be some quiet times, because it's only in a quiet mind that the truth can speak. Because intuition will always be there, but we don't notice it. And intuition will always make itself felt sooner or later, but you don't want it to be later, because intuition will end up, by making you ill. Intuition might have been guiding you, you're overdoing things, your work-life balance is wrong, you need to take more rest. And, rest is for wimps, so is sleep, so are lunches, lunch breaks, all that kind of stuff. And this is when people get burnt out. And it's literally burnt out. People fall flat. And it's because they haven't listened to the warning signs. People will say, listen to your body. That's what they mean. Your body will tell you everything, but you have to give it a chance to speak. So how do you know when a feeling's right, Ray? As I said, it's not easy, but if you're doing the right things to give quiet times for yourself, the chances of it coming from a good place are much higher. And that's why people say they feel it in their heart. They feel something in their heart, or they get goosebumps. Goosebumps are normally pretty reliable. We all have our own little cues here that we learn to understand, but not easy, because the counterintuitive thing is, the more you try to find the zone, the Zen mind state, the psychoic sweet spot, the more you try, the harder it is. You have to let it come to you rather than you going to pin it down. So it's a bit, I'm really using some terrible metaphors now, but it's a bit like a fisherman. The fisherman can't go out saying he or she's going to catch a fish. All the fisherman can do is look at the weather, judging their experience, going to the right spot, thinking what kind of bait the fish might want, and then it's just putting the hook in the water. And then you can't make a fish come. There may not be any fish there, but you just have to wait. You have to be patient, and so it is. So it is with all of us. We have to be patient. Talking of patience, the most patient animal I know is there's a certain kind of snake that burrows just underneath the sand, and it eats once every 100 years. That's the only time it moves. It lives for about 100 years as well. So don't think any of us could do that. Don't know whether I've answered your question, Ray, given you some things to think about.
Yeah, I'm not sure I made full sense of that, because I'm aware that, like, both physically and mentally, you do things and suddenly you come out of it, that's the right term, and you're not aware of what you've achieved. And you sort of look at it and think, how have I managed that? And you sort of ask the question, is why is the mind, whether it is not telling you why or what you've just done, and how to do it again?
Yeah, that's very true. And as a coach, it's really important for me to be able to identify that as well. because somebody does something brilliant. How can we put this in a bottle and learn from it next time? And very often we can't come up with anything. But the thing that we can come up with is this, and it's really important for anybody to remember this one. I was very successful in that moment. Might have been playing golf, or it could have been anything else. I don't know how I did it, and it doesn't matter that I don't know. All I need to know is that it's in there somewhere, and I won't have lost it. It will be there, and it will come. And all you can do is be like that fisherman and find a good place to sit and be patient for it to come along.
That's a challenge.
Sorry?
That's a challenge.
I never said this stuff was easy. But the great thing is, you don't need to get this stuff right 100% of the time. Even if you can move, going back to the 1% and the 99%, even if you can change that 1% to 2 or 3%, it can still make a huge impact on your life and the people around you.
Caroline.
I was going to say, actually, I've often been aware, sometimes when you leap to the wrong conclusion or misinterpret something, you can do that because that's what I wanted to see or how I wanted it to be, and then you react. So there wasn't, but sometimes when you're quiet, like at nighttime, you lie there and think, actually, I got that wrong. I didn't understand that, and you can usually try and rectify it. But so is that intuition, that you've clamped down on intuition by being anxious?
When people are anxious, they shut down everything. I don't believe that there is any way a person can be intuitive and anxious at the same time. Just like when kids are at school, they're not going to study and be able to learn stuff when they're anxious. People just don't perform well under anxiety. And anxiety, of course, is part of this psychotic state. It's mild compared to the real psychoses. We call it a neurosis anxiety. But anxiety is always worrying about future things. Have I made the right decision now? What's going to happen next? I'm going to worry about this, that, and other. Now, when people start worrying about the future, they really are becoming delusional, because none of us know. Anxiety can't live in the moment. If our mind and our decisions are made in the moment, there can't be room for anxiety. But it'll find ways of creeping in. It'll find ways of saying, well, yeah, you might feel good right now, but this is temporary, because next day guess what's going to happen. So yeah, anxiety is the enemy for sure, and anxiety is definitely the ego construct, part of the ego construct.
Yes, thank you.
And while you were talking, one other thing came to me. Steve Peters wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox. He was the mind coach for, I think, the UK cycling teams. And he talked about the chimp. I guess, in a way, he didn't use the word ego, but he might have felt that. He might have agreed with that. And he told people, he said, first of all, don't think from the hours of 11 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. I think roughly like that. The point he was making was that at night, if you wake up at night with these kind of worries, it'll be like the ego that's woken you up, and you're best to find ways of just discounting them. Go back to sleep if you can. If you can't go back to sleep, read a book or make a cup of cocoa or something. Okay, well, the last thing that I wanted to kind of wrap up with, the most popular webinar we've done, judging by the amount of YouTube views and likes, is the show when we talked about the 12 habits of a Buddhist monk. And don't really know why it resonated with people, but it did. A lot of people watched that and liked it. And I just wonder how many of those of you who are on the show or seen the video, I just wonder how many of us can remember them all I don't have them here. I haven't looked at that list since the show. But I can certainly remember a few, because a few of them are definitely universal truths. And you don't have to, you don't have to be a Buddhist monk, but they're things that will be familiar, things that you will have read or heard from other places, and you'll have certainly heard them from me. So have a little think about that. Can anybody think of one that sticks out in their mind?
To do things slowly.
Yeah, I think that was I think that was right, Gray. From what I remember, there were several rules that were all a bit like that. Again, I'm speaking from memory now. I hope I don't get it wrong, but I think they said do one thing at a time, and I think they did say do it slowly, or at least immerse yourself in it, the whole experience. And I think they said and only do things that are necessary. So that means eliminate unnecessary stuff. So I guess those 12 rules, we wouldn't want to be in a Buddhist monastery. It must be pretty boring, but I suppose that's all part of the training, and they don't want to leave, so they must get something from it. They certainly seem to get spirituality, and they certainly seem to get calm minds. If you've visited any of these places, or you've met or seen Dalai Lama on TV and whatever, he certainly exudes calmness. So if it's a calm mind that you're looking for, many people have chosen to follow some of those rules, but those rules are universal. They don't belong to Buddhism, and they don't belong to anything else. They're just out there. And we, of course, are the generation that is making it so harder than ever before, because we have this instant, these instant attention-grabbing messages, from our technology, from our smartphones and all that kind of stuff. Unless we switch these things off, you'll never have more than a few minutes or a few seconds sometimes to be doing your own deep thinking, because there will be always something else or somebody else distracting you and taking your head into a different place. And it's usually a place where you don't want to go, because as all marketing people know, the thing that really helps to market stuff is to create fear. And politicians know that as well. I'm not saying they all use it or ever, but you look what's on the news at the moment. There's a lot of fear out there, and there's not many good news stories. Yeah, I'm sure there's good things going on, just like there always have been, but they don't get the airwaves.
That's how we met, actually, me and you, Steve. You were having that lecture in Camden Town in a bar in Stables Market. It was called Psychoic Revolution, or Psychic Powers. And I was obviously interested in that matter. And my girlfriend had tickets, and then she offered me one. So I went with her. This is how we met. And, a couple of years later, we're still together, working together, being friends. What I was going to ask, because what you didn't say actually about psychic, that we all have it. So we all are psychics, but it's about, you actually touched on it, talking about intuition, which is really silent voice somewhere hidden below all those layers of ego. But it's there, and we all have it. So we all are supernatural. And it's all about, what techniques and technologies can we use to tap into it, that infinite intelligence. And the question I have, because you mentioned twice, balanced mind. What is balanced mind in terms of brain waves? Because, we operate our operating system day to day, probably even now, most of us would be in better brain waves. But I think, so, and that's the question, what is the right balance? Because, constantly we have all the time all sorts of different measures of different waves. So what is the balanced mind? What is that perfect mixture, recipe of brainwaves?
I don't know, and I'm not sure that anybody does. But we are getting a handle on these things, because the neurologists now, as we know, they can attach electrodes to our brain, and indeed now with scanning, CT scanning, and EMR scanning, we can actually see the brain when it's doing different bits of work, and we're seeing which bits light up. So we're learning about the brain scientifically all the time. And the four brain waves that we know the most about are the alpha and the beta and the delta and the theta. And I always get these a little bit mixed up. But as you say, I believe that our normal thinking is the beta wave, and we're looking to shift that to more alpha waves. And in deep meditation, very deep meditation, we go deeper still into those theta and delta states. Now, if you were in a theta and delta state, I don't think you would be much good for dealing with all of the stuff that goes on in an average life, if there is such a thing for all of us, an average day. So I guess it's that balance between the alpha and the beta. And Greg, you'll know from your experience on your heart math, I mean, that's what you're really doing. You're balancing the sympathetic. I'm trying to avoid long words, but this is the answer, Greg, for your benefit. You're finding that balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And that you can get that from heart math, you can get it from meditation, you can get it from doing anything creative that you immerse yourself in. You can get it in taking a dog for the walk, you can get it fishing, you can get it climbing up a hill to see how big that house is. So it's not mystic. There are many activities that will allow us to find more balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, between the yin and the yang of our body chemistry. Okay, is that okay, Craig?
It is okay. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So, so this is the final goodbye for now from me, but I'm sure that we will stay in touch. And I hope our last show was interesting and has given us food for thought that will keep us going on this journey. Because once we come so far, it'd be silly to go back to the bottom of the ladder again. So, have a wonderful week yourselves, find some balance in your life, and try and help the people around you to find some balance in theirs. And the great thing is, we're all copiers, we're all mimics. So if you're calm, the people you're sitting with, sooner or later, will be calm like you. Vice versa as well works. So that's part of this non-verbal communication that we still have inside us. So calmness is infectious. So go around, spread the bugs, spread the balancing bugs. Okay,